So I'm sure like me, when you saw the Paralives gameplay trailer reveal, you were probably very excited. I certainly was. They revealed a lot of interesting features, which I personally wouldn't have even thought about, but they included in the game, and it's made me feel even more excited for it. Although near the end of the gameplay trailer, they revealed something very interesting, which is that Paralives will never have any paid for DLC. Instead, it will just receive free content updates and rely on their Patreon funding, as well as the sales from the game when it officially comes out. This is something that I've been a little bit skeptical about before, and I know a lot of other people have been a little bit skeptical about it. I feel like as Simmers, we're so used to the Sims 4 DLC model that we can't imagine a life simulation game in any other way, but that's simply not true, because in all other video game genres, there are different kinds of pricing models and different things which affect extra content and whatever. So I don't necessarily think a life simulation game must have packs like The Sims, but it does definitely make me question if Paralives will actually survive or not. For those of you who don't know how video games money, it's not just directly through the sales of the video games. Most video game publishers, major ones at least, also have shareholders. These are people who invest their own money into the video game publisher. For example, with EA and The Sims, shareholders invest their money into EA and expect a higher return as EA make more and more money. That's why over the past couple of years, you may have noticed a lot of video game publishers making decisions which do not favor the player, but they do favor the shareholders because they're the most important thing to them. And this is basically how it works with The Sims. Shareholders pay EA, EA makes Sims packs, they make money off the packs, and then they pay back the shareholders, and then the shareholders give them more money. Paralives, however, have gone from a completely different angle in terms of being an indie game. They're relying a lot on Patreon funding, and apparently they're earning £30,000 a month. And that's obviously quite a lot of money, but obviously there's employees that work there. There's a lot of people, so it probably gets stretched that very, very thin. It's probably not as much money as you think. Although I wish I was earning 30 grand a month. Maybe I need to make my own indie game and put it on Patreon. Although it can lead to a bit of a predicament, because when Paralives comes out, people may stop funding the Patreon because they bought the game. Then their ability to have these employees who work on the game may dwindle down, or they may get paid less and leave. Maybe not enough people will purchase the game in the first place and it will flop, and then maybe they would have to use DLC in order to make it work. Although one thing that Paralives does have, which The Sims 4 currently doesn't have, is trust and a good reputation. Seeming that they have over 7,500 Patreon members is quite a lot. So it seems like they've definitely got a lot of trust in the community, and I think that can go very far in terms of predicting how well the game is going to go, because obviously people who are a part of the Patreon are able to see updates of the game as they go along. If they felt like the updates that they were receiving weren't good enough, then the Patreon members would obviously be going down a lot, but they don't seem to be. So that signifies that there's still a lot of trust with these people in terms of the development of the game, which is good, further signifying that it probably will do quite well on launch. And games can do extremely well without DLC. Another indie game I know a lot of Simmers play or have played is Stardew Valley, and that was made by one person. That game didn't have any shareholders, and it doesn't have any DLC, and it continues to get free base game updates with huge overhauls, which are kind of like packs. And the game does extremely well. It's like one of the best-selling indie games ever. In general, though, simulation games are like the #1 gaming genre where you will see a lot of DLC. You see DLC in basically every single major simulation game. Although most of these major simulation games, again, they have shareholders. I definitely think it's a really big issue with the modern video gaming industry. If we got to keep making more and more and more and more and more money, because now as a result, we're seeing a lot of video gaming companies relying on models like battle passes, microtransactions, DLC. We're already seeing in The Sims 4, for example, as well as packs, we have the kits, which are microtransactions, and now we've got our first ever Sims 4 battle pass. It's definitely something that's very prevalent and not going away. Although Paralives is obviously very different, as they don't really have anybody to answer to. But that does beg the question, how will they make consistent money without shareholders, without DLC? Because most games have at least one of those things. Are Paralives making a gamble? Based on community feedback, it seems like Paralives is the most popular of all upcoming live sim games, despite being the smallest, which I think is really interesting. Obviously, as a player yourself, there are many benefits towards having a model with absolutely no DLC. For example, there is a lot less investment risk. In The Sims 4, there is so much DLC, and it's got to the point now where the game is like fundamentally breaking down, but so many people have purchased literally over $1,000 worth of DLC, but they've invested all this money into a game that's now fundamentally very, very broken at the core. I don't know if you guys have heard of the sunken cost fallacy. It means that when you've already put so much money into something, you'll continue putting money into it, and your justification is, well, I've already put so much money into it, so I may as well just keep going. It means you end up investing a lot into something that makes you feel quite dissatisfied. But obviously when The Sims 5 comes out, there might be a shift in opinion, because there was some investment risk investing in Sims 4 packs, as we see apparent now with the game fundamentally breaking down. But with Paralives, if there's no DLC, then there's not really an investment risk. You might purchase the game, and even if you don't like it, every single piece of content update in the future will be a free update. So there's always a chance you could go back to it and you haven't really invested that much in it, which is obviously a massive bonus. There are obviously a lot of negatives too. For example, there will probably be less updates because there's not enough money going into it in order to speed things up. Like with Stardew Valley, for example, the updates are so slow. The updates are always really great, but they take ages to come out. I also think another negative is that there will likely be a smaller player base at first. Free-to-play games typically have much larger player bases, even though they have a lot of cash grabby DLC. Simply the fact that it's free means that they appeal to a huge audience, whereas paid for games require a lot more in terms of trust before people want to purchase it. Especially with the game coming out in early access, you're obviously not getting the full experience, so it's going to take a lot, I think, for people to purchase it without even having DLC. I mean, there's a reason why the Sims 4 base game came out for free and their advertising project Renee is free to download when it comes out. That's because that model works, but you can't obviously do that if you're not planning to have any paid for content. Although there are definitely some alternatives to making a game free to play in order to have a big audience and then have DLC, or having shareholders, or all these other ways of making money other than just selling the game. There's obviously things like merch, which I think could definitely work for Paralives if it built quite a big niche community, which to be fair it already has. They could also keep the Patreon open after release. I don't believe they've ever really spoken about this out loud before, but I think it would be interesting to know if they kept the Patreon open after the game has been released. You guys let me know what you think about that, if they did plan on doing that. They could also do a sequel or spin-off games. These days, yeah, sequels don't really exist because, as I said, developers just release a free base game or something and then just add all this content to it. But if Paralives got a good enough backing, actually adding a sequel or some kind of spin-off would be very good. I know, again, I'm going back to Stardew Valley, but I know he's working on Haunted Chocolatier, which is a similar game, but it's quite different at the same time. There is also the opportunity of console integration to make more money. I feel like something like Paralives maybe could work on console, although it would take a lot of work. And then, of course, there's in-game ads. Although I don't think if they did that, the game would be screwed. They can't be doing that. This is not a mobile app. This is not Candy Crush. Honestly, I'm personally still very skeptical about if Paralives could survive without DLC, because we do live in a video game era now where people literally just do not want to invest in video games anymore because everything else is just coming out for free. I personally genuinely wouldn't mind if they released paid DLC if it was like cosmetic only. I purchase a lot of DLC for a lot of games, and the DLC is always cosmetics. In The Sims 4's case, the microtransactions are not aesthetic only, like gameplay is a lot behind DLC, which is why I find it very cash grabby. But in other games, like I just spent £55 on Valorant credits, and with that I literally just bought like one gun skin, and it's so overpriced, but I genuinely don't care because it's just aesthetics. Even though it is a rip-off price, ironically I don't feel that ripped off because you don't need it. It's like 100 100% optional. So I think if they did some kind of very optional DLC like clothing or build mode items, kind of like Sims 4 kits, but better value for money, then I genuinely would not be against that at all. You guys let me know what you think about the concept of having DLC in Paralives. I'm personally really excited about it. Of all of the upcoming live sim games, I would say Paralives is my favorite one, just because I think it has a really good vibe. If you are interested in any more Paralives content, then you should watch this video here. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next one.